If you've ever said, I'll buy a house one day when I can afford it, this episode might make you think twice. Because what if the problem isn't actually money? What if the real barriers are things we never talk about, like big expectations, social pressure, or the fear of buying something that doesn't look impressive enough? The truth is, many people could actually afford to get into the property market far earlier than they think. Today, we're looking at the costs that aren't on your bank statement, because sometimes the biggest obstacle to home ownership isn't the bank, it's the story we're telling ourselves. Joining me is Emery Campbell. She's the managing director of Pam Golding in Bloberg, and she has almost 40 years of experience in the property market. Welcome, Emery.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So you've seen it all. You deal with people buying and selling homes every day. You've been in this game for decades. In your experience, if money isn't the real problem or always the problem, what is actually stopping people from buying their first homes?
Madge, I think the majority of people would like to own their own home. They just think that they're not in a position to do so yet. And I myself, as you clearly must work out, am past retirement age, but I love this job so much that I'm still very active in it. And if I think of myself when I was 25 or 30, we could hardly afford to rent a property back in the late 70s, early 80s. So home ownership is something you want, but as a single person, very few people actually make that commitment. And then they find their partner and they get engaged or they live together and then they get married. And then they start thinking about the future. But many people think about the future without actually putting their feet flat on the ground. What can we afford now? They still, as we discussed when I had a chat to you the other day, the majority of people, they want to hang where their community is, where the school is, where their friends are. And very often they can only afford to rent that and not buy it. So all of a sudden, one day they wake up and they are 40 years old and they still renting. Whereas if they bought when they were 30, half their bond would have been paid by the time they were 40. So it's a decision that is based on commitment and how badly you want it. It's not always money because you buy a small property to start off with.
Yeah, that's true. So do you think people are confusing the status that comes from living in a certain neighborhood with long-term strategy?
I absolutely do. I mean, let's just use a suburb here in our area. So when I first came to the Western Seaboard in 1999, the first few houses in Sunningdale were just getting built and they were running along the highway. And they were kind of between those power lines and the R27. And I think entry level was around about probably 250, 300,000 for one of those small 2-bedroom units. Okay. Today, entry level in Sunningdale for a new unit is 4.5 million. You can buy a second-hand older one close to the highway for 2 million. But everybody wants the 4 million rand one. And that's what stops them from buying. So then they rent because their mates have a 3-bedroomed one with a braai area and a pool. So that's what I want. So I spend 40,000 rand a month on rent. I could be paying a bond.
Yeah.
So there's pressure.
Yeah, there's so much pressure. And I think too many people are not necessarily educated enough, or we don't learn these things in school. And I don't think many people actually seek out enough advice, and many other people are renting, so they think that's fine to do it. So why are they still the conception that renting is safer even when it doesn't build long-term security?
I have friends that are good friends of mine, and I don't know if it's an affordability issue, but they definitely believe that you don't get the return on your money, and property prices don't go up enough. But that is absolutely not true, because what people do not understand, if you bought that property in Sunningdale 8 years ago for 2 million, you would have lived there for 8 years. So normally you would have paid rent. Now, 8 years later, you have the property. The capital appreciation is now probably up to 3.5 million if you sell it, but you've also lived there. So if you take the rent, even if it's 20,000 Rand a month, and even if it didn't go up, it's 240,000 Rand a year. You multiply that by 8, you have blown at least 1.5 million on rent that you get absolutely no return on. Nothing. It's gone. It's paid off someone else's mortgage. It's paid off the landlord's mortgage. And the landlord's got the capital appreciation. So you've paid his mortgage, and the house is now worth 3.5 million.
And he paid off the mortgage, and he's also, when he sells with such a big profit.
Yeah. So I think for young people, especially if you factor your stages through life, you have kids today, probably around about 28 to 34 is a sort of a more normalized area. People don't have children that young anymore. So if you start having kids at 28 to 30, you don't have to straight away move into a 3-bedroom home. You can buy an apartment with 2 bedrooms. By the time you have your second kid, you sell that apartment and you scale up. And then you get the property with 3 bedrooms, because you would have had capital growth. And I don't know when people are going to get on the property ladder if they don't start soon. Because by the time you are 55, your mortgage should be paid. Because the last 10 years of your life should be for your retirement. And it can start off by buying a 1-bedroom apartment and then have children. Maybe they can even share a bedroom while they're little, and then sell that, get some money, then buy the 2-bed or the 3-bed.
Yeah.
But I see so many fancy cars and SUVs parked outside our private schools on the Western Seaboard. And I just wonder how many of those people are renting.
Yeah.
Because all that happens with that car, it depreciates in value. But it looks good.
Yeah, so that the whole car and lifestyle aspect of things brings me to my next question, which is all about societal perspectives and the pressure to keep up with the Joneses and the comparison culture we all trapped in on social media. So is all of that distorting our expectations of what a first home should look like?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think sometimes our value system is, as you say, it's very social media orientated. How do I look? Not what am I? And where is this going to take me? But today, my observation is I want to live in the right place. My kids have to be at the right school. I need to be fashion forward. I need to have the nice car. All those things depreciate. Whereas the people who make these solid investments in the beginning cut their coat according to their cloth, in 10 years' time, their world is far less stressed, far more stable for their children, and their relationship has less pressure on it. Because one thing that is a reality, and I see it in my rental division, the rentals are going up on average 10% per annum. When you renew your lease, because of the stock shortage, the rentals are going up by approximately 10%. So if you're paying 40,000 Rand a month now, next year you're going to pay 44,000 Rand a month. And the year after, you're going to pay 48,500. The bond repayment stays the same unless the interest rates go up. But we are now in a cycle where our economy is very stable. And over the last 18 months, I think we've dropped 3 percentage points. So people's bond repayments have actually reduced. Whereas if you're on the treadmill of rentals, it just goes up.
Yeah, that's a very scary reality for many people. So when people say just get into the market, what does that mean in practical terms? Does it mean buying a place where you can live with your family, or does it mean just get like a bachelor flat just to have property on your name?
So here's my thoughts. If you are a 40-year-old person and you're married with 2 kids, you are more than likely going to want to buy a 3-bedroom property. So maybe you don't buy the property in Sunningdale. Maybe you buy the property in the Winelands, or you buy the property in Tableview. And then you fix that, tidy it up, stay there for 3 or 4 years. Who cares if you live in the Winelands or in Tableview? Because you are actually investing in your asset. And when you decide to sell it, you're going to make a couple of 100,000, if not 1 million. And then you are 45 or 46 years old, and then you upgrade into the next property. But a lot of people don't buy because they want to live there, but they can't afford to live there. So they must reverse a little bit, buy where they can afford, make it their home, improve it. After a couple of years, flip it. And remember, you're allowed to make now a 3 million Rand profit on a sale without paying capital gains tax. So you're not taxed on that increase you get on your original investment.
Okay, that's very interesting. I think there are other things that people are also careful for when they're buying for the first time, all the hidden costs that comes with the purchase of a home, like the transfer duties or the agent rates.
The transactional costs. So first of all, the seller pays the commission, okay? So the buyer does not pay the commission. The commission is included in the selling price, and the seller pays that. But I had a quick look here, and if you buy a property for, let's start off with 1.5 million, your transfer and registration costs are going to be 50,000 Rand, okay? And your mortgage costs are going to be your bond registration costs are going to be another 37,000 Rand. So you're going to have another 100,000 Rand, okay? And it's very likely that you should be able to get a bond for at least 80 to 90% today. Your bond repayment cannot exceed more than a third of what you earn, your gross earnings. And I strongly recommend that people who are thinking of going into buying a property speak to a mortgage originator. We personally have a lady called Helen who's been with me. I've had this business for 26 years here in Blouberg, and Helen's been with me for 20 years. You go to a mortgage originator, she's with Uber, they pre-qualify you. Then you know exactly what you can spend. And she will tell you, you'll qualify for a mortgage of 2 million. You're going to need X amount for costs. So I'll give you a pre-approval certificate and you can go shopping. Okay? So you don't have to go and visit a Sunday show day and not know whether you can or can't afford this property. You then go to property 24 and then you shop in your price range. Because you're going to spend that 90,000 Rand if you spend 1.5 million. Okay? If you buy for 3 million, you are going to spend on your transfer costs 164,000. Your registration costs. And that includes the transfer duty, that includes the attorneys, everything. And your mortgage for that is another 57. You're going to be in there for 225,000.
Okay.
Just to put that property in your name.
Yeah.
But again, if you're a married couple and you can get quite a high mortgage. So you need a 20% deposit. So you're probably in this journey here, 10 to 20%. If you have 500,000 Rand available, including your costs, you would be able to buy a property for about 3 million. If your and your husband's income is sitting at around about 70,000 Rand joint income.
So, Emery, is the current market a reason to wait or a reason to move and get out there and purchase your first property?
Okay, so here's the bad news for the people who think they can wait. The reality is supply and demand determine price.
Okay.
We've had an influx of semigrants coming in here in this price range that the Western Seaboard is in. And then, of course, luxury. We're not even talking about the luxury homes in the estates where foreigners are buying and wealthy people are coming from. But just to enter, get your foot into the market. Just get into a property. Remember, at 55, your mortgage should be pretty much paid up so that you can retire and not have that added extra worry about where am I going to live.
Yeah, that's very, very good advice. So now I'm wondering, for someone listening, a mom with 2 kids who's renting, and she's in her late 30s or 40s, what should she be doing right now if she's not a homeowner at the moment or yet?
I think the first thing she must do is either contact Helen at Uber, or if she wants to contact any other mortgage originator that she knows, and she must find out what she can afford and what is possible for her. Once she knows what credit or what mortgage she would qualify for, she then has to scour the Property 24 private property, Pam Golding website, etc. Because you can shop online without having to walk into any of our offices and feeling pressured. So first, acquaint yourself with the inventory that is online. And then, again, if you don't want to be pressured, you can just go and visit a show day to get an idea of an area. But if you have to step out of the area you're in at the moment and slightly downgrade to a neighboring area, it's not a downgrade socially, it's an upgrade personally, because you now own your home and the rent's not going to go up by 10%. And you're going to have capital appreciation. So that's the pressure we spoke about in the beginning, where people have this feeling of keeping up with each other instead of sense and sensibility landing.
Yeah. And the other day, you said it so well when we were planning this episode. You said people have champagne taste on a beer budget. I love that quote.
It's true. It's absolutely true. Like, when they want the champagne, they can only afford to buy it by the glass. They can't afford to buy it by the bottle. Okay, which means don't drink it. Just have some good old Chenin Blanc.
So I think the way you put it in perspective, that by a certain age, you need to start thinking about retirement and what you're going to do when you stop working and stop earning your monthly salary. And that is very important in the long term, because you don't want to be renting still when you're 70 years old.
You know, I had a very enlightening experience last year. I matriculated in 1975. That's a very long time ago. And we had our matric reunion and in the Eastern Cape. And off I went. And I'm still working. And I think I'll probably work for another 5, 6, 7 years, who knows? Because I find myself active and motivated, and I still have a purpose. But what really saddened me is when I saw some of my schoolmates, and we're all hugging 70. Let's put it that way. We're all hugging 70. That worked in an environment where they were retired at the age of 63, 65. And their journey has forced them to sell their properties and to rent or to go into stuff that they never ever thought in their life they would have to live like that after all these years. And it was such a wake up call for me, because in my daily world, I deal with people that are similar to me and in my work environment at Pam Golding, and we're all moving forward. And to suddenly be exposed, and there were about 42 of us from our matric class. But I felt so sad for people when that weren't as lucky as what I am. And you don't realize that when you're 30 and when you're 40. But it was such an awakening for me.
Yeah, that's a very harsh reality to be faced with, that we want to avoid
Yeah,
when we get to that age.
we do. Yeah. And that's, we're living now for that age. So to keep up with the Joneses now, where are the Joneses going to be? So I can only say to people today that get your priorities right, start small and slowly grow, and own your own home. Do not be at the mercy of increasing rentals and no capital growth.
That's such good advice, Emery. So, one more question. I always say we don't really talk about the kids on this podcast because it's all about the moms, but I do want to bring the kids in here now. What does home ownership mean in the long term for our children's future? And what should we be teaching them about home ownership? Like I said at the beginning, it's like we don't have the right information, and no one taught us or educated us about home ownership. What responsibility sits with us to teach our children and to give them the legacy or the freedom or the choice that many people my age didn't have when we were in our early 20s?
I think the first thing home ownership does is create stability in a family. Secondly, if you own something, you take care of it and you are responsible. So straight away, they will see the mom cleaning. They'll see her working in the garden. The dad will do the maintenance because this is something you own. But it's the stability of home ownership where the landlord can't give you notice, where you can spend as long as your parents decide, you will stay in that home and it's their home. You're not going to not have your lease renewed and move again and move again. And, moving is also expensive. I consider myself to be very fortunate. I grew up on a farm in the Eastern Cape, and I only ever knew one home. And my children also, when I lived in Johannesburg, and then I was transferred to Cape Town. And my children have also lived when I moved from Joburg to Cape Town for 18 years in exactly the same home. And that is home. It's where memories are. When they went to university and eventually, I lived in Newlands for 18 years and my business was here. I then moved here to Big Bay and I bought a plot and built a house on one of the estates. But then that was 10 years ago when I was 55 years old. And now I'm going to live there, I hope, God willing, for another 10, 15 years. But home ownership for a child is stability.
Yeah, that's very, very important.
And there's something you can leave. There's also if something happens to you and you pass away, or there's an asset that can be left to the children. Whereas when you've been paying years and years of rent and you pass on, there's nothing.
Yeah,
There's nothing.
sure. That's a lot to think about. What can we teach our children about when to buy, how to get into the market?
So I think when you were there the other day, I told you we have quite a big rental portfolio. We have over 400 leases. And we encourage kids that have just left university, when they looking for their first rental, they very often don't qualify on their own, but we encourage their dad or their mom or a family member to go on the lease with them so that they can start up a responsible credit profile. So from the age of 24, 25, you need to set that up, because by the time you speak to Helen from Uber, you already can show that you have been renting for 2 or 3 years, you've paid for your cell phone, and then she looks at you along with your pay slip, and you start thinking about owning your own property. The younger you start thinking about that, and it doesn't matter, we call them cupboards because they're so small.
How cute.
You can buy a 36 square meter studio apartment for 800,000. And your bond repayment's going to be maybe 10,000 rand. But it's yours.
Yeah.
So, and that's what people don't want to do. They want a bigger property. They want to be on the beachfront. They want a view. And they'll pay 15,000 rand a month rent instead of owning their own home.
Yeah. Emery, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing all this invaluable information with us. I'm sure you've given me and so many other moms a lot to think about and very, very practical advice to follow. And I'm so grateful that you've shared it all with us, and I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people.
And if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm available. I love seeing young people going into home ownership because they are our future. Well done to you for creating this awareness amongst your peers. That's really necessary.
Thank you, Emery. I really appreciate that. Wow. Emery has really given us so much to think about. Buying a home is about building something slowly. It's about stability and security and a future. Your first house might not be perfect and it might need a few layers of paint, but property has always rewarded one thing more than anything else: time in the market. And maybe the real mindset shift is this: stop trying to buy the house that proves something to everyone else and start buying the one that quietly changes your future. The goal is getting into the market and creating options for yourself and your family. Follow this podcast if you haven't already, the Moments Podcast for Working Moms. Rate this episode if you enjoyed it, and thanks for joining. I'll see you next time.